Hi again. Today I'm going to be presenting on our vocabulary term World Bank. So defined in the textbook, World Bank, this organization is a vital source of financial and technical assistance to developing countries around the world. Its primary focus is on helping the poorest people in countries. As constituted, the World Bank is supposed to be both a bank and a development agency focused on poverty alleviation. On their website, they state they currently have 189 member countries and 5 institutions. And their stated mission is twofold: 1, to end extreme poverty, and 2, to promote shared prosperity. The textbook mentioned only 2 of the organizations that comprise the World Bank, the IBRD and the IDA. However, the World Bank website lists 5, so I wanted to share all 5 to give you the scope of the World Bank's work. So the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development provides loans and development assistance to middle-income and credit-worthy poor countries. The International Development Association is essentially their lending arm and focuses on the poorest country and provides 0 to very low interest loans. The International Finance Corporation finances private sector investments and provides technical assistance, and the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency encourages foreign investment in developing countries by providing guarantees to foreign investors against loss. And lastly, the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes provides international facilities for arbitration of investment disputes. So the World Bank history. It was founded in 1944 as the IBRD to originally help rebuild countries after the devastation of World War II, along with the International Monetary Fund. This was really set among the backdrop of Western leaders really fearing after World War II that an unregulated world market might lead to more poverty and another world war. And following World War II, the U.S. became the world's most powerful country, and the World Bank and IMF were controlled essentially by them because they had a $1, one-vote system versus a one-country, one-vote system. So in essence, the United States had a lot of power to kind of shape the world after World War II. In 1950s, the focus really shifted to infrastructure and development. In 1956, they founded the IFC to lend to private companies and financial institutions. And then in 1960, it was followed by the IDA, which was founded to emphasize developing countries. So all of the history of the World Bank has really showed this steady shift toward eradicating poverty as their primary goal. So for 2 decades, the World Bank and IMF employed these structural adjustment programs. We've been reading a lot about those last week in our class, and we really saw how they cut public spending in food, medical care, and education, increased exports, and reduced barriers to trade. In theory, these SAPs were supposed to attract foreign investment that would eventually stimulate the country's economy and reduce debt and poverty. But what they really did was speed along globalization. We saw that developed countries under SAPs transferred $178 billion to Western banks in the 80s and 90s, and they increased poverty around the world. We read a lot about how they particularly harmed poor people and vulnerable populations. Following World War II, and SAPs, globalization around the world really showed the dominance of the United States and neoliberalism. And the World Bank was, in essence, a neoliberalism instrument of U.S. foreign policy at this time. In the 1980s through the 1990s, the World Bank and IMF started using SAPs when developing countries couldn't pay back loans. And then these SAPs basically controlled domestic policy and were used to control developing countries to serve American interests. I can't emphasize enough, though, the destructive effect of World Bank during this time on developing countries. I did some additional research on the total global amount of loans being repaid by developing countries versus the total global amount of aid that's being given to developing countries, and I was really shocked by what I found. I made this graphic to depict this cycle of aid and loan repayment to show that the amount of aid being given to developing countries is only about 1% of the total debt being repaid to developing countries. And this is in 2019 and 2020. We saw just these incredible negative impacts on public health due to SAPs, and I think the impact was felt especially on poor countries. In class we read about the resulting worsening of maternal and child health indicators, specifically for poor populations. The example in Nigeria talked about user fees really causing average monthly deliveries to drastically drop from 800 to 160 births. And in Bangladesh, we read about the negative impacts on delivery, accessibility, quality, efficiency, and coverage for healthcare. I think some indicators show there were long-term economic gains from the World Bank interference, but the short-term cost to population health has been devastating. If you're interested in checking out current World Bank projects, I would really recommend going to their website. They have all of their projects, loans, and grants posted, and you can see in 2020 what they're currently working on. Just important to keep in mind the role in history that the World Bank had as an instrument of the United States and neoliberal power following World War II. Thank you.